It's amazing how spiritual you feel when you're single and you have your schedule and all that stuff. And then you get married and all of a sudden you're like, how selfish am I? The statistics for someone that has my background is die by overdose, domestic violence, or suicide. And that's years, decades after leaving. Every day is a fight for my life. It was because we were surrounded by healthy families, like the people who owned the land had us over for dinner every Monday. I was ready to leave 3 days after getting there, but they had us over on Christmas Day. They cared enough about us that they didn't do it before Christmas, they didn't do it after Christmas. We were part of their Christmas. We were an extension of their family.
Well, we are very excited to have Deanna Lynn joining us today on our podcast. And Deanna is somebody that Michelle, our residential program director, and myself had the opportunity to hear and learn from at the National Trafficking Sheltered Alliance's annual conference they do called the Sheltered Conference. And Deanna, you were just part of an incredible lineup of speakers that were at that conference. And I remember Michelle and I sitting there, I think it was on the closing day, and we had an opportunity to hear your testimony and just the passion of the work that you are doing with Refuge for Women Kentucky. Just really was something that stayed with us to the point where we said, we need to have her on one of our podcast episodes. And so as an introduction to Deanna, and I'll let you share a little bit more too about who you are and the work that you're doing. But Deanna is the executive director at Refuge for Women Kentucky. She is an author, a public speaker, and somebody who is just a leading voice in the anti-human trafficking field. And we are very excited to be able to have a moment to learn from you, Deanna, to hear a little bit more about the great work that you're doing and how we can help equip others to get involved in helping prevent human trafficking, assisting with the intervention, as well as, of course, the restoration of survivors. And so would you be able to share a little bit more about who you are?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me on. I really really wish I could have made it there in person, but I'm so excited for what you guys have lined up in the future, and thank you for even thinking of me. So a little bit more about me is I actually I am married. We celebrated 8 years.
Congratulations.
I have twin 4-year-old girls and a giant 75-pound dog. So that's what my family looks like. They're probably, my first and best ministry. But that family wouldn't have been possible if I didn't go through the restoration phase myself. And so that's why I'm so passionate about getting to offer others the same safety. Safety is our most basic human need. And without that felt safety, and I don't know that I really ever felt safe for the first 3 decades of my life. And so to have a place where you can feel safe, you can rest, you can restore, my family wouldn't be made possible. And my girls are so loved, and my marriage is a really good one. So that's why, that's a little bit more about why I'm passionate about giving this to others.
I love that. I remember hearing some of your story, and you were sharing just your heart for ministry. And in fact, you are working through, you're going to be going into a doctorate program for ministry while being an executive director. Of course, you're a mom, you're a wife, a lot of different spinning plates. How do you manage it all?
I think time management is probably one of my love languages. So I know it's not in the book, but it is. And the thing that I love about the Doctor of Ministry program at Asbury Seminary is that they make it for people who are in full-time ministry. Like, they want you to step away from your master's degree, gain some experience, and bring that experience to the table so that as we're researching, our questions are more informed. And I really love that they do it that way. So because it's a hybrid type model, it allows us to get really close with our cohort. So my specific cohort is in organizational leadership with an emphasis on women in preaching and leading. Now, as for my research topic on trauma and theology and leading with lived experience, how those are going to intersect, that'll kind of unveil as I go. But I love that I'll have a cohort and a community where all of our collective ministry experiences will be put on the table to inform each other. But then we'll be able to go back after our residencies each year and gain some wisdom from our teachers, our mentors, and the classes that we get to take throughout the year. So it seems really manageable, but I don't know. I like a good challenge.
That's exciting. And what drew you to that line of study and ministry? Where for you would you say that call started to come forward? And you're, like you said, you're actively working in ministry as the executive director at Refuge for Women Kentucky. And where would you say you started to see that call come forward in your life as you then pursued that?
Well, I think the first call, I mean, when I came out here, I had no idea that there was a school that you could go to study the Bible. But I just kept telling myself, well, he uses uneducated people. Like, I don't need to go to school. Like, I'm just going to use what he gave me. And then somebody had told me, but that piece of paper could actually open more doors for you. And so I just kept knocking until they let me in. And I told them I have no vocational goal except to leave more informed and transformed. And I knew that if I had both of those things, it was going to affect my whole life's ministry. And my whole life is a ministry. My whole life is an offering. As far as my specific topic of research, initially I had always wanted to dig into how trauma informs our theology either direction. There seems to be a lot of theology about what deliverance looks like, and it seems like it's like one or the other, and it's not. Like there's like 5 different like ways that God can deliver us, and for me, I think having been able to move forward in life, maintaining my freedom, even when all of my consequences and pain haven't been removed on this side of earth in this now, not yet, both and side of the kingdom. I really wanted to see like what makes the difference for somebody who runs towards God and somebody whose pain leads them away from God. I've been blessed that I have always run towards him because I know that like there's free will. And even though we're all created in his image, not everybody lives into that. And when we don't live into that, it hurts not only yourself, but communities and other people. I just want to
love
be able to communicate that.
Yeah, I love what you noted there about you can either run toward God or away from God. And I think we all have that in innate, nature and response where we have a choice we have to make and what it is we choose to do. But you highlighted something just so beautifully as well about the fact along the lines of the healing, it's continuous and it's not forgotten what happened, but it's a matter of pursuing God in that healing. And can you share a little bit for you where that maybe that was always your perspective going through, or would you say there was a moment when there was a realization that hit that, what, I want to pursue the goodness of God in this, and even just highlighting for maybe others who don't fully understand the lifelong journey of healing that happens after any type of trauma, but especially one as significant as trafficking. Can you highlight that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think for me, living with PTSD and, all the other things, that I live with, I'll always go to prayer first. But for me, faith has not been the absence of fear. It's been moving forward even with it. And so, my body has endured a lot of trauma. And even though my spirit is free, I still live in my not yet resurrected body. And so how to move forward carrying that trauma with me and still going into wholeness. I have just come to the realization like my trauma doesn't excuse behaviors. It doesn't excuse me to hurt others. but it shows me like how much of a team I need to help me stay above it. And it's a daily thing, and I need a lot of people. But yeah, I think for me it was just some people are delivered, of alcoholism right away. They just never touch it again. And for me, I'm almost 18 years sober, and I can still taste the drugs. I can feel the drugs. My body is physically craving that stuff. But because I maintain and fit spiritual condition, so long as I do, I stay away from those things. But my body never stopped craving it. So how do we live free and flourishing even when our body's, constantly trying to fight us?
Yeah. It's that, yeah, that dynamic of the individual battle, but also you mentioned just being surrounded by community and others and the importance of being plugged into a community. And where have you seen the importance, especially of community in the work that you do and in the anti-trafficking field, where I think we hear from a lot of survivors that, they feel very alone and isolated, but there are moments then when there is community that's introduced and the change that you start to see come forward. And how have you seen that at Refuge for Women and the importance of community in that healing process?
Yeah. Um, so when I got married, it's amazing. This is going to sound so awful about my character, but it's amazing how spiritual you feel when you're single and you have your
Yeah.
schedule and all that stuff, and then you get married, and all of a sudden you're like, how selfish am I?
It's true.
And then like a lot of the trauma that was still in there, like I was as healthy as could be, but until somebody got that close to me, that trauma was not going to come out. You know? And so when I took on this job, like, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, yes, I was made for this. like we're gonna do some great things. I am about to come up on my 1 year, and I've never felt more ill-equipped in my life. And it's so funny because it wasn't until I entered into this space that I realized I'm gonna need a lot more tools.
Yeah.
It is lonely as somebody with lived experience because you're fighting the most well-meaning of people for your voice to be heard. And it's not that their experience is invalid, but they're going based on, experience of like working with women. But sometimes some of those decisions can really minimize our voice and our choice. And I really love at this last conference, how survivors are coming together and they're saying nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
And it's not to discredit, like we wouldn't be here if people didn't step into our pain and speak up for us. But now we're at a point where we're like, hey, we're seeing some things. We want to fix some things. We shouldn't be the only voice, but we should definitely maybe have the majority. Because like that's going to inform, other people's care. So I'd say it does feel lonely. That is going to be the topic of my third book is leading with lived experience, and what's a shared leadership struggle and what is a unique struggle when you're living it. I've never had to do so much counseling and medical appointments, and I've got leadership coaches and psychiatrists and everything to help me stay above this. The statistics for someone that has my background is die by overdose, domestic violence, or suicide. And that's years, decades after leaving. Every day is a fight for my life. So when I'm out there and I'm reliving all of that stuff in my body, though my spirit is good, my body can only take so much. And that's something only somebody else with lived experience can understand. So when I go to these conferences and I hear about a survivors caucus where they're all getting together to make policy changes, I can't help but cry because it's like, oh, like I feel so seen, like you get it.
I think that's huge, that community, and that was a huge takeaway for us, and just seeing so many lived experience experts at the conference. And like you said, how can we elevate and continue to create that community in which that happens? And what would you say continues to maybe be some challenges that are faced with either the element of elevating survivors or just challenges in general in the anti-human trafficking field? What are some of those that you are currently recognizing?
Two things that I've recognized is one, the intentionality. Like, are we willing to go the extra mile and reach out to women and say, hey, I have these job openings. Would you like to explore it? One of the barriers is the credentials. And I got to say, most of the people that started these ministries didn't have credentials. You kind of just learned as you went, and they have expertise in an area that no one else has. And so I think we need more intentionality about reaching out. And, I know it kind of creates like a double bind when you're reaching out to people who went through your program, because you don't want them to feel like you're using them, for your program or something. But you want to elevate their voice. So maybe if organizations could come together and maybe say, like, here's some opportunities at other organizations. You don't have to choose us, but if you do want to use your voice, we want to help you, get into that space. And it's not your story. It's your voice. Where do you want to use your voice? Do you want to use it in communications? Do you want to use it in development, accounting? Helping to develop all things leadership, I think, is really key. But also, another thing that we come across is just the different diagnoses. Every decade, you've got like new diagnoses. So before it was like, okay, we're all bipolar. We all have PTSD. We all, quite a few of us have OCD. The real one, people use that like it's just some common word. And then this last 10 years, it's been like the DID, and everybody's like, oh, she has DID. I don't know if we're equipped to handle that. And it's like, listen,
Deanna, can
all
you
of us.
explain a little bit about
Yeah.
what DID is, just in case some folks don't know what that is?
Absolutely. Dissociative identity disorder. So what happens is our brains are these magnificent little things that helped us to survive. And one of the ways that it helped us to survive is we kind of separate from ourself, like our core self. And this can happen, I think sometimes it was like multiple personality disorder, and sometimes we were diagnosed as schizophrenic and stuff like that. But the beautiful thing about that diagnosis is the longer you have safety and the longer you have healing, reintegration is actually possible, no matter how many alters that you ended up creating to protect yourself. And so if we look at a diagnosis like that and say, okay, like this is common, let's be aware that it's hard to even diagnose something like that until somebody's been safe for 3 years to give an accurate diagnosis. And always working on reintegration, not addressing the alters as their own personality, but like addressing the person. I really think we could do a good service to a lot of people that are coming in that have been diagnosed that perhaps in an emergency room or through their last psychiatrist. But
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of
it's huge,
confusion.
and I think and it highlights the absolute need, at least for our team. We've recognized the need for that clinical care that partners with the restorative care and that healing process, but addressing some of those issues, like you said, where these might have been labels or things that were just slapped on at a time when there wasn't a ton of understanding, or maybe it wasn't the clinical professional that should have been diagnosing, and it was like, hey, we're kind of theorizing this might be what it is. And that can do a lot of hurt. And so anyway, that importance of that pairing there. But I wanted to go back. You had mentioned the importance of, as we elevate survivor voices and opportunities, especially in employment, and reaching out even to individuals who maybe have graduated from our program, and as time has passed, and saying, hey, is there opportunity here for you to maybe join the team, join the movement? How can we continue to elevate? And in a way, your story was that, right? You, if I remember correctly, you had graduated from Refuge for Women and are now the executive director. Can you share a little bit about what that journey looked like for you?
Yeah, so one mistake that a lot of people make is they assume because we have the lived experience, we're supposed to be in direct care. So they're like, well, everybody become a peer support specialist.
Yep.
That's important.
Yeah.
Also, I have other gifts. So I would really like to develop those things.
Preach it. Yep.
Um, so when I came back, I had like well-meaning leaders who were like, God's telling me that you're supposed to be here. And I'm like, gosh, I'm not really getting that same message. Am I not hearing correctly? And so I think we've got to be careful projecting what is logical with our spiritual and commingling that together. So I raised support. I was like a missionary within the Refuge for Women. And within 10 months, I realized, that the best thing that I could do for my sisters is show them that you can have a life that has nothing to do with being known for being in exploitation or out of it.
Yep.
And, I had one of the residents was like, I really want to work here too. Of course you chose this. Like you don't have to deal with any men. And I'm like, no, I didn't choose this out of fear. And so that's when I realized, when we're bringing people back into the space, there's one of two ways that you can go about doing this, because one, I don't think you can make an informed choice until you see what life is like out there. And that's what I got to do. I was a part of very light focused ministries. I managed a global nonprofit in biblical literacy. I was a leader in Bible study fellowship. I'm on staff at my church in the children's nursery. I got to explore different parts of myself. And then as I gained experience, I got to bring that back to the table. However, some of the barriers is not being able to gain that experience. And so this could be a space where we help people gain that experience. And, we opened up our 24 apartments. And the thing that I'm so excited about is the fact that women have time to explore who they want to become now that they're free. When your whole program is developed, based on the healing, which is necessary, and then it's time to transition out and just get any job, that can't be the goal. Because you go out there, if your body is like not made for a labor job and you're making minimum wage and you're not able to get above these barriers, these people start to look like an option again. And so with the apartments, you actually have time to explore who you want to become. And that's something that's been missing for a very long time. So allowing women to try, allow them to try different areas in the field and gain the experience. And then they can either take that out there and do it for someone else, or gain the experience out there and then decide if they want to come back in. So it could go either way, but we have to be intentional with developing the whole leadership person and not just be like, okay, you're ready to get a job and that's it.
I love it. And it's so, so important for from start to finish with that healing recovery. You kept mentioning the word reintegration earlier as well. And I know for Greenlight, as we're working to launch our restoration home, that's a big piece for us. The moment we start engaging with our residents, we're preparing them for that time of reintegration from the moment they begin. And part of that includes finding employment that is sustainable, livable, but also considering what are the costs that we as a nonprofit are incurring on their behalf, from medical to dental bills. But also, you mentioned, there's extensive, there's still counseling and medicine appointments. And so are we equipping graduates to be able to afford that ongoing care as well? And like you said, some of those jobs that we might think, oh, this is great or it's fun, aren't really a livable wage. And so, but I want to go back to a little bit. We've mentioned Refuge for Women, but can you share a little bit more of all of the great work that you all do as you offer a continuum of restorative care and your various programs and opportunities that you have?
Yeah. But before I do that real quick, I just want to mention, the collaboration is going to be key.
Yeah.
I think what I wish more women knew is, who we want to become in that first year that we're out might be vastly different 5 years later. And the biggest struggle and biggest gap is not being able to find people to support our dreams as they morph and change. And so when you're doing personality tests and you're getting, you're finding out what path you want to go on as a career, that's going to look very different in your first year of healing than year 5. So that ongoing support. 2 organizations that I'm in communications with. One is the Empowered Network. Like, they come into that space. So we don't need to do all the things, right? Like, we just need to partner with people who are like, okay, I've got it from here. Let me help her, as these barriers come up down the road. And another one that I love is Scarlet Hope and their job training program. Like, they actually raised the money to do a whole year job training program. So they are actually getting paid to do the job training that is their job. And I really love both of those models. But as far as what we get to do, we started in 2009 with one little house. I went out to the program in 2011. I didn't really know anybody who was doing such care at the time. And I had already tried rehab, psychiatric institutions, meetings, counseling groups. But I could not figure out how to connect with humanity after the last decade of my life. So I was really grateful for this one home, but we realized, 8 beds is not enough. Since then, we have opened up 10 homes across the United States. We work with different organizations to help relocate women safely. A lot of times they don't have IDs. So helping get relocated and reestablished wherever they are. We have emergency care available, which allows someone to come in if they're having to detox off of something. They have medical staff who can help do that, or we partner with detox facilities. And that gives a woman 30 to 90 days to actually make an informed choice about her next step instead of signing on for like a year and then being like, what did I do when I get here? But if they do want to make that step, we have those homes available where they can stay for 1 year, have 4 whole seasons with no more trauma, no tragedy, no worrying about who's going to come into your room at night, to really explore some of the hurt that made us a little bit vulnerable, a little bit more vulnerable to the people that targeted us in the first place. And then the transitional living homes and the independent apartments, have been wonderful because it allows you to stay into community while working towards getting some of that independence back. And we have 2 different models there.
That is huge. What would you say has played to the success of being able to have the one home you mentioned in 2009, was that right? And then now you guys are in multiple states and you're offering just this beautiful continuum of restorative care from the emergency housing all the way through to transitional housing. And like you mentioned, collaboration is huge because no organization can do it alone either.
No.
And there are key partnerships and others who come alongside us and refresh our teams even as well in those moments when you're like, this is hard work. And like, you mentioned sometimes it can feel lonely. Like, does anybody else understand the depravity and what is happening and those who are desperately in need of help? But what would you say played to the success of Refuge for Women and being able to grow and develop in the way you have? And I want to note too, in doing it with excellence and quality care, elevating the voice of survivors and providing that opportunity, it's beautiful. All that has played out, and I know it's not any one organization is perfect or has it all down. We all have our things, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, could you speak to what sparked that growth?
I think the thing that stood out to me from the beginning is just the tenacity and the teachability. The people who founded this ministry, I mean, they just wouldn't take no for an answer, like anytime, like we face so much rejection when we're out there, like, please, like help support us so that we can do this work. Anytime it gets discouraging, I just remember that somebody did that for me. Right. And so, no, it hasn't been done perfectly over 12 years, made a lot of mistakes. But we learn from them, we fail forward. And the teachability is what stood out to me is every year they were like, okay, what did we learn? How can we do better? And they continue to be teachable. The only reason we even exist with 3 different cares is because somebody was, our founder was able to break ground and try something new. He was willing to fail completely. And when I say completely, I mean like this is hard work to start something that nobody has ever started before. And so to be able to put everything forward and do it like our emergency home, like we opened it up in the middle of 2020.
Wow.
With no idea how to do medical billing and no idea like what emergency services, but he was willing to do that. And that takes just a whole other kind of character. Some people wait for all the mistakes to be made and then be like, okay, I want to replicate that thing. But they were willing to put their whole selves out there and say, this is needed. I have no idea what it looks like, but here's how we're going to do it. And then we get to sit back and be like, okay, now how can we do it better?
Yeah.
you know?
And that's huge. That assessment piece, the
Mhm.
willingness, tenacity to move forward. But I'm sure too, I mean, it naturally you need a community that responds to that as well and says, yes, we are in this too, and we want to partner alongside. And so it is just it's amazing and encouraging to see just that great work that you all are doing, moving that forward. And so, Deanna, I do want to take a moment to highlight you wear many different hats from executive director to speaker. You're going into your doctorate program, as we had mentioned earlier, but you're also an author, and
Mhm.
you made mention of a third book that will be coming soon. But can you share about the current books that you have out there and where people can purchase those as well?
Yes, the first book that I put out there was Purchased, Leaving the Sex Trade. And my main motivation for that book was, there's this dichotomy between like, well, she's there by choice, she can get out when she wants, and then somebody who's sex trafficked. And so like my hope is when someone like me is approached fresh out of high school, thinking that her only option in life is to be prostituted out, here's what that looked like. Because, if sex trafficking, if the only thing we're thinking of is kidnapping and smuggling, which are nowhere in any of the definitions that anybody uses, we're really missing like what coercion, manipulation, what it is that keeps somebody there, the psychological manipulation, the soft coercion that increases as you go. So I really wanted people to see like, okay, when you're participating in pornography, which was part of my story, and you're excusing it because she's there by choice, I want you to see like where those intersections happen, what somebody's life looked like. I also wanted that book out there for mentors to see, when somebody comes to the refuge for women, it's not going to be like clean. A lot of people, they want to be part of the rescue. They want to get someone out. It's like, okay, well, now what? Now what do we do? And so if they're feeling discouraged because somebody's like, like, okay, they got out of the industry, but they're back on drugs. Okay, they got off the drugs, but now they're in this abusive relationship. To show them what the complexities look like. The second book was on the integration piece. I felt like there was a lot of material out there on what it looked like when we were out there, and maybe sometimes even material on the ministry we can have afterwards. But I was like, what does life look like? Who's got material about what it looks like to make a friendship, or how to move forward in the reintegration process when you've been so many different selves? How do you walk forward as your whole self, accepting, not denying any part of your story or who you are, but also living forward into your newfound beliefs and your ideals while still carrying all that trauma behind you? Like there's going to be some collision. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be messy. But some of that is a shared human experience, just in maturing. Some of us maybe are maturing later because the trauma had stunted us. And so I go through an integrated living beyond the sex trade, just what the next 10 years looks like after you leave a safe home and are working towards some of those ideals that you had set out for yourself.
Yeah. I love that. And I would encourage folks, I believe the books are on Amazon,
Mhm.
and folks can get those there. And we would encourage you read that. And we share often. Greenlight, we do a lot of education and cannot emphasize enough the need to read literature and listen in on the testimonies shared by survivors for us to continue in that education, that learning. And I firmly believe we're always always students of any craft, of anything. As you mentioned, we grow and we develop and continue to learn. And so Deanna has just some phenomenal resources for everyone to be able to look into that and just learn from what she's put out there. Um, and the other thing, Deanna, you had mentioned earlier about how in your testimony of healing, how you had tried rehab, you had tried counseling, you had gone through so many different avenues trying to find healing and wholeness in that. But for you, it was the restoration. It was the safe house that you went to that changed that. Why was that so different for you from all of the other resources and outlets you had tried?
For me, I mean, I remember the phone call I had with Ked Frank, and I said, if I just need you to know that if this doesn't work, I have nothing left. Like I've tried all the things, like my option is death from here.
Wow.
And he was like, I don't know that it will, but like we'll, we'll walk with you through it. Um, it wasn't necessarily the program, though I did get to do like I got to learn things like boundaries. We had an awesome dating class and, like all these things that maybe I didn't learn in my initial growing up. And but for me, what it was, one of the values at the time was that healing happens in a family environment. And I know shelters are moving away from this model. They want to be clear that this is a program and like all of this stuff. But for me, it's a family. This is my forever family. These are the people that I invite to my wedding and my baptism and my baby showers and stuff like that. But it was because we were surrounded by healthy families, like the people who owned the land had us over for dinner every Monday. I was ready to leave 3 days after getting there, but they had us over on Christmas Day. They cared enough about us that they didn't do it before Christmas. They didn't do it after Christmas. We were part of their Christmas. We were an extension of their family. And then I had another family that had adopted me as well. And when I saw what family could look like, I just had realized that that sense of belonging that I wanted. You'll go to anybody to belong, even the people that hurt you, if you don't have a right sense of belonging. And so they gave me a chance to belong, and they lived out. They got close enough to me for long enough that I felt like a part of, and not a project, and all of that. And that really made the difference.
Goodness, that's amazing. And we hear a lot of times people that ask, how can I support various anti-trafficking efforts? How can I be a part of it? And there's sometimes we joke with we love, we're obviously a ministry and have some phenomenal church partners, but there are times where that helping does hurt. And sometimes those really good intentions they may not really be what the individuals need, or might actually end up hurting them a little bit more. But what happened here was an authentic community and family was created, and they
Right.
were present and they were there. And what would you say? We all have those stories for us that are like, oh man, very good intentions, but poorly executed, and it wasn't great.
Mhm.
And so with that, for you, what are ways though that church families, that communities can help rally behind the work that is being done through Refuge for Women, for Greenlight Operations Restoration Home? What are ways that are helpful to the residents and to the staff that
Mhm.
will not that, like you said, it doesn't feel transactional, and it doesn't feel like, oh, I put in my time before or after Christmas, but I'm going that extra mile. What would that look like? What would you encourage those folks who are maybe eager to get involved? How would you encourage them to direct that?
So I think one of the ways that we went wrong is, like we would get mentors, and then the mentors would be asked to buy them things, and not from us, not from the staff, but like women would be like, let's see how much I can get out of this woman, right? And so like it takes a long time to get out of that mentality when you've come from the street, or depending on which channel you came from. And so for me, I think what made it more authentic is, getting off the property, getting to go experience life. So getting to serve with them, getting to go to the grocery store and doing your catching up while doing everyday life experiences, talking over laundry, like all of that was more authentic than, and it's hard for mentors because they're like, look, they have nothing. Like let's just shower them. And that's nice. We love that. But
Mhm.
I loved getting to go out to lunch. My mentor used to always like laugh. She's like, why do you order so much that you have leftovers? And I'm like, because I want to relive this. Um, you know, but
Yeah.
but it's really just the everyday stuff. If we can help come up alongside women and include them in the things that you're already doing so that they know how to build a life and a community outside, that's what's going to set somebody up for success. We really need to make sure that we are not a one-stop shop for somebody's emotional and spiritual needs. We need to connect them to more people, more family, and more activities so that they know what it's like to truly live and not just survive.
That's huge. That is huge. That community that forms within the home, but also that community that looks outward for life
Right.
beyond, and ultimately that reintegration.
Mhm.
And so, as we start to bring our conversation to a close, just a few questions we like to ask others. But what would you say brings you the most joy in the work that you get to do?
Um, I think, I really hated this term, like, when people would say it, like, "You're a hope dealer." I'm like, "I don't wanna be any type of dealer." Um, but that's really what it is, like, my job, no matter what kind of whether I'm meeting with another person who has survived this, whether I am meeting with a donor or, training the police department, um, my job is always to see how I can bless their life, and I don't really even do anything but share the truth, right? I love that line. Don't be clever, just be content to tell the truth. And when I tell my truth, hope is sparked. No matter who I'm meeting with, they get to see a living and active God that's undeniable in my life and through our ministry. And that's really all I get to do, no matter what hat I'm wearing.
I love that. That's a good takeaway and applicable in so many other arenas with that. Another would be what would you encourage our supporters and community? What words of encouragement would you give to them as they rally behind the launch of the restoration home, and even just bringing forward the message of freedom in their various communities, workplaces, and all of that. But what encouragement, what feedback would you have for them?
A lot. Well, let's
Bring it
start with
on.
the let's start with the first one. It's expensive, right? Like, each of these homes probably costs around $1 million to operate each year if you are adequately staffed.
Yep.
Um, and I really loved our speaker last year and how she connected the Good Samaritan, and how the Good Samaritan brought this person to an inn and paid for that inn to take care of him. They didn't bring him home. They didn't put this guy on their couch. Like, he brought him to somewhere where he could rest and get well, and they could take care of him. And he came back and he refunded them, right? And so just really understanding, like everyone wants to see this happen, but it takes actual physical dollars to make that happen. So that's really important, is to get behind somebody financially. The second part is the volunteers. I think it takes 40 volunteers for every 4 women to really help create a sense of community. Now, we opened up for 24 women. Do you know how many volunteers that is? Like, we need a lot of volunteers to create that village for people. And then the education piece, I always tell people, there's the 5 P's. There's the of who is doing the coercing, right? Who is the one that's compelling somebody in to engage in a commercial sex act? It's your partner, number 1. It's your parent. It's familial or familiar. So you got your partner, your parent, you've got a provider, you've got the producer who's going up to you offering modeling jobs fresh out of high school, and you've got the peddler who's getting you hooked on drugs. And then once you're so sick, is asking you to do things to keep that sickness away. So you got 5 P's, just educating people on what each of those scenarios looks like when your partner is grooming you for the long term, when your parent is the one who has trafficked you, when somebody's offering you provision or protection and then asking you to engage in a commercial sex act. Those are the things that we need to be looking for. And by all means, stay away from vans that are following you. But if you're only looking for a van, like, you're going to miss the person sitting next to you in the church pew who has been dealing with this their whole life.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Deanna, you have left us with so much great information, and it is just a joy to be able to have you on our podcast and to just hear from you again. Friends, I encourage you, please go and check out Deanna's books that she has authored, and check out the wonderful work that is being done at Refuge for Women. And we just want to thank you so much for listening in and joining us on today's episode.